Now, on a similar vein to the range DPS specialization video, now we have the melee one. It is going to work in the same way. I'm going to look at the specialization based on what it used to do in BFA, what it was good at in BFA, and bad at in BFA, and what exactly is changing in Shadowlands. Are you trying to play a spec hoping it's going to be the same as BFA? Do you want it to improve? Did you like the spec but you hated that it had no AoE and you want better AoE in Shadowlands? Now we're going to see how the specs have changed. Remember that the most important part of a DPS is its damage profile. What type of abilities does it have and what are they good at? Single target, AoE, cleave, spread cleave. Is it going to be consistent or is it going to be a burst type of damage? Is the burst short, like Shadow Dance, or is it long, like Avenging Rat? Is it short and single target focused or short and AoE focused? All of this is going to summarize your spec, and this is what is going to be good at and is what is going to be known in coming into an expansion by the community. Particularly for PUG players, this is pretty important because once the community decides that Feral Druid is a meme spec, Feral Druid is a meme spec. I'm sure people are gonna come there with papers showing proof that actually Feral Druid is top DPS in Cleave, but it doesn't matter. It's too late. It's what people's image of that spec is, and it's very difficult to change it in a community. So let's start by looking at the melee specs, and let's see if any of you guys have actually guessed correctly. The 4 specs I will be going over in this video. So Windwalker Monk first. Why? Because it is in my opinion, the worst melee spec. I'm gonna be a contrarian here. The spec plays fine. The spec rotation is enjoyable. It has a very good damage profile because it is tied, the entire spec is tied around Torment and Fire, which is a very strong cooldown and a very versatile cooldown. 15-second duration on a 90-second cooldown, which can be reduced significantly by your spiritual focus talent. Unfortunately, what makes it the worst is the same problem they had in BFA. Monk's Mastery makes you do extra damage when your ability is not a repeat of the previous one. The problem is that Windwalker Monk does not have enough spenders to keep up with the amount of combo they generate. There is no Eviscerate, there is no Rapture, there is no Earthshock or Earthquake, there is nothing that dumps massive amounts of chi. You have Rising Sun Kick that has a 10-second cooldown, you have Fist of Fury which has a 25-second cooldown, Blackout Kick which is spammable for single target and Spinning Crane Kick for AoE. And all of those only spend 1, 2, 3, 2 chi, which is not enough. You get drowned in combo points that you cannot spend. Number 1, you can spend because your abilities are not effective enough, they only spend too little of it. And number 2, because your mastery pushes you into not repeating abilities. So when you have 5 combo points, and your Rising Sun Kick is on cooldown and you can't use it, your Fist of Fury is on cooldown and you can't use it, all you can do is Blackout Kick. You are forced in this depressing situation where you have to go Blackout Kick into Spinning Crane Kick on single target just because you don't want to repeat your previous ability, which feels bad. It's like a Shaman being forced to Chain Lightning on single target to keep a buff up. It doesn't feel well. It doesn't feel nice. Windwalker Monk has not been changed from BFA. Zhuan, the White Tiger, has been made baseline, and the talent has been replaced by Dance of Chi, which is a good talent, but doesn't fix this problem at all. Okay, then what about Covenants? We keep complaining that Blizzard puts borrowed powers in the game. Let's see if borrowed powers can bail you out here. All the Covenants from Windwalker help you generate more chi, just so you get overworked with chi even more. Night Fae Feline Stomp makes you generate chi. You have Bone Dust Brew, which tags enemy with the brew, and then your Spinning Crane Kick makes you generate chi based on the enemies you hit, again, and you don't have a way to spend it properly. Ventier's Covenant is just a 3-minute cooldown press and forget type of thing. And then you have Weapons of Order for Kyrian, which is possibly the worst Covenant ability that shows the lack of understanding of the spec by Blizzard, because Weapons of Order discounts the chi cost of your spenders, which is shocking, because that's not what you want. You don't want your spenders to cost less. If anything, you want your spenders to cost more and do more damage. That's much better. Sorry, this is just all very depressing. I loved Monk. I loved Monk in Legion. It was my first alt that I was planning to alternate on my main in BFA, but it still has too many problems. Legendaries, again, we can go over them, but Last Temporal's Capacitor is the old stacking, cracking Jade Lightning damage, Jade Ignition, stacking damage that you can dump with your spinning Crane Kick. Juwen's Treasure is a buff to your Rising Sun Kick damage. None of this helps you with chi spending. None of this helps you with your finisher abilities. So if you enjoyed Monk before, you're gonna enjoy it still the same. If you hated Monk before, you're still gonna hate it. If you were hoping that it fixes its problems coming into Shadowlands, they're still there. Almost all of them, sadly. So just to have a change of pace, we go from a spec that got 1 talent reworked in Shadowlands to a spec that has got a 9. 9 because Enhancement Shaman has now moved over to Maelstrom weapon. Your melee attack have a chance to give you a Maelstrom stack, 20% more damage on your next spell and 20% less cast time. You can use 5 of them to get an instant overpowered spell cast, and you can store up to 10. Enhancement Shaman never really had some glaring weaknesses in BFA when it came to damage profile. It was mediocre in single target, which was counterweighted by pretty high cleave damage and AoE damage. When it comes to Shadowlands, Shaman is still very well-rounded. They have so many tools they can choose to do the type of damage they want. They now have Flame Shock that they can spread around for cleave. They have Frost Shock as a filler that they can talent with Hailstorm to hit really hard and be extremely good for cleave situations on 2 to 4 targets. It's very strong. Sundering is still there for AoE. They have moved away from the jackpot slot machine style of BFA because now your Stormbringer, what reset your Stormstrike and gave you this sort of either I proc it 10 times in a row or I suck at damage. Instead now Stormbringer doesn't proc from your auto attacks anymore, but just from your specials. So it is way more straightforward in how you use Stormstrike. It's a chunky, heavy-hitting ability, but it's not the entire thing around your rotation. Enhancement Shaman has also gotten pretty good legendaries, pretty varied. Primal Lava Actuators help you and your synergy around your Flame Shock and extra Lavalash usage. You have the Witch Doctor's Wolf Bones, which is to help your cooldown if you want to be cooldown based with Feral Spirits, although Feral Spirits right now are pretty weak, but Blizzard already posted that they are working on it, change them. You have Legacy of the Frost Witch, which is currently by far the strongest, the most all-rounded legendary you can go for. You can use 5 stacks of Maelstrom to reset the cooldown of your Stormstrike and double its damage on the next use, which is very good. On the Covenant end, they are rather weak. They are not very entertaining, and the only thing that synergizes with the spec is Primordial Wave, which is not that good. However, what I think the real problem of Enhancement Shaman was in BFA was the utility. I know I mentioned multiple times that Shaman and Druid have one of the strongest utilities in the game, but they have the minor utility, the slows, the stuns, some off healing, you know, some snares. But when it comes to things like Arcane Intellect or Battle Shout, when it comes to Rallying Cry or Darkness, you know, raid cooldowns, when it comes to immunities, Divine Shield, Cloak of Shadows, that's where Shaman sort of fell through. And the only thing they have gotten, though, they have gotten something, which is Wind Fury Totem, which might or might not be a mandatory buff you want in a raid, but besides that, they haven't gotten anything new, so they are still going to be lacking in all those categories. But going into Shadowlands, they are definitely more well-rounded. They have several options in their legendaries and in their talents to go for more single target oriented or cleave / AoE oriented builds. So as a summary, I really enjoy the rework that has been done, particularly around the removal of the slot machine. If you did like that playstyle, then you're not gonna like this, definitely not. But if you didn't, then you can definitely try out Enhancement Shaman, because it's really enjoyable to play right now. Havoc Demon Hunter. Please don't start seething and foaming at the mouth. I know, possibly the most hated mini spec in the game, envied by everyone else, people constantly complaining. Why do they get everything? They have a raid debuff for a guaranteed raid spot, they have a raid cooldown as a defensive, they have an immunity if they want to, they have an offensive dispel, they have a out of combat CC they can use. Well, let's just not be biased for a second, okay? What are the problems of Demon Hunters? Besides the fact that they have 3 buttons and they are brain dead boring to play. The problems are that Demon Hunter has always scaled horribly in the game, and they always had to be bailed out by something. Legendaries, artifact weapon, more corruption, Azurites. Their base kit is awful. It scales terribly. It has also been nerfed to be scaling even worse. Remember when Chaos Strike used to give you a chance to refund Fury based on your crit, which is good for scaling because, you know, eventually in the expansion you will get more crit and eventually it will be pretty good. It's been nerfed into refunding on a 40% chance, which essentially depicts the situation Havoc is in pretty well. They scale terribly. They have to get some outside help to scale properly. I know it sounds weird, you can't quite put it into context when all you see is Demon Hunters doing like 300,000 burst DPS out of nowhere with 3 buttons and you get mad. Well, Demon Hunter in BFA obviously had insane cleave, insane AoE, insane burst, and mediocre to bad single target. Of course, insane utility and mobility. So if you're worried by this premise, they're still gonna be fine in Shadowlands. However, so far at least, tuning permitting, they don't seem to be as broken as Legion and BFA because they don't have anything that bails them out. Their Covenants don't bail them out. They have Sinful Brand, which is a rather strong ability, particularly because it's very strong in single target, which is their weakness, so it helps them. And they're also strong because their legendaries are varied enough. You have Collective Anguish, which is essentially a double I-beam, which is always fine. You also have Chaos Theory, which is more single target. Help. And then you have Fell Bombardment. They received very few talent changes, but the one they get enabled this legendary to work. Immolation Aura is now baseline, and now the old Fell Rush deals 100% more damage talent has been replaced by Unbound Chaos. Now, Fell Bombardment can be synergized with Unbound Chaos to do massive damage on your next Fell Rush after you use Immolation Aura. You can use Master of the Glaive to give you 2 charges of Throw Glaive, Momentum to increase your damage after you Fell Rush, and then Fell Bombardment to make your Immolation Aura stack up the damage of your Throw Glaive. All of this combined actually changes the spec drastically. It introduces Fell Rush, Vengeful Retreat, Throw Glaive, as well as the now baseline Immolation Aura into your rotation, and makes the spec much more enjoying and entertaining to play. So if you were interested in Demon Hunter, maybe you like the style, you like the edginess, but you were thrown off by the brain deadness of their play. As long as Fell Bombardment is viable and the momentum build is back, you're actually gonna find it very fun to play. If you enjoyed the brain dead 2-button spam of, I don't know why or how, but if you did, then it's still gonna be there, but it's gonna be weaker. So far, there is no sign of any Furious Gaze, 6 million haste, stacking and bailing you out of your shit design in Shadowlands, so you're gonna be able to do the things you did before, but weaker. My personal opinion is just hope that Fell Bombardment playstyle is worthwhile, because it's really cool. And we are going to finish with the poor state of Feral Druid. One of the least played specs in the game, one of the least played melee specs in the game, only played more than Survival Hunter and Sub-Rogue. So what were the problems of Feral Druid? Similar to Enhancement Shaman, they have a million utility pieces, but at the same time they have 0. They have lots of utility that doesn't really make you indispensable for the fight, for the Mythic Plus or for the raid encounter. You don't have any immunity, you don't have any raid group defensive, you don't have a buff, and in BFA coming into Shadowlands nothing changes. You still lack key utility. You're filled with secondary utility, but you lack the key ones. When it comes to damage profile, the weakness of BFA is that Feral Druid has no burst. It doesn't matter if it's single target or AoE or if it's cleave, that there is just no burst. Your main primary cooldown Berserk is absolutely terrible, likely the worst DPS cooldown in the game, alongside probably Shadow Blades for Sub-Rogue. It's a cooldown that increases the effectiveness and damage of your Rake and Shred, which is terrible because Rake and Shred are generators, not spenders. They do very little damage by default compared to your spenders. You don't want to increase the damage of your Mutilate if you're playing Assassination Rogue. You don't want a Destruction Warlock cooldown that increases the damage of your Incinerate. This is the same for Feral. You don't want generator damage increase, you want spenders. And Berserk, the only thing that it does to your spenders is give you a chance to refund combo points, not damage. Feral has been reworked in 8.1 to give them an AoE talent roll, which is very good. Primal Rat is a very good AoE finisher because you spread that rip to all target. However, still the same problem. It's not burst, it's not immediate, it's not quick enough. You go in Mythic Plus, you pull a pack of 5, you have to rake all 5 of them, and then Primal Rat to spread the rip. That's like 6 GCDs, 7 GCDs, and all you're doing is dotting them, and half of them are already almost dead, so you lose tons of value on your dots, while a Demon Hunter simply jump on top of them and then I-beam them all. You know, one of the things I have always said about Feral Druid is that Feral Druid is the spec that needs Exsanguinate. Feral Druid just needs a way to capitalize on those dots before the dots expire because the target is dead. They need some way to actually benefit from them. Their Covenants do nothing to synergize with this. Convoke the Meme and spamming 16 abilities randomly is meh. technically categorized as burst, but it doesn't really do enough. And then you have Ravenous Frenzy. The problem with having a burst cooldown when your spec doesn't have burst cooldown is that Ravenous Frenzy doesn't really synergize with anything. It's the same with Balanced Druid that I already went over on the range DPS video. Balanced Druid has no burst DPS, so taking a Covenant that gives you a burst ability cannot be stacked on top of anything. If you gave Ravenous Frenzy to a fucking Fire Mage or Paladin with Avenging Wrath, then now we're talking. But if you can stack it with anything else, then it's just poor. And Feral Druid coming into Shadowlands doesn't really improve in its problems. The complete lack of burst is still there. The complete slow ramp up of its damage is still there. Legendaries are also rather poor. You have Frenzy Band, which, as I mentioned, Berserk is shit, and the legendary synergizes with Berserk. It doesn't make it good at all. And even worse, what it does is it adds you an extra bleed on the target, which is not what you want. You want burst. Eye of Fearful Symmetry, more combo point regeneration. Katai Curio, extra effectiveness on your clear cast, increasing your energy. The Apex Predator's Craving, probably the strongest one of all of them, but still, none of this actually helps you with your burst. The spec is still very good in single target, and it is pretty good in long encounters with cleave and multi-targeting dots, but the fact that they have no burst, and the fact that they bring no buffs, no utility, no immunities to the raid, still keeps them in their same spot as before. And with this we're done. We have gone over the first 4 melee specs. Out of all of them, I picked up 2 of the specs where I think they have a pretty promising future. One being Enhancement Shaman, I think is good all around, and one being Demon Hunter, although it's a little bit tied to a particular build. Don't forget that the Momentum build was killed off by Blizzard like 1 week into Legion and has been dead since forever. And 2 specs that have way more problems, Windwalker and Feral Druid, which is sad because I actually like them and like to play them, but it doesn't look too good coming into Shadowlands. So tomorrow I'm gonna put out the next 4 range specs and how have they changed coming into Shadowlands. And please continue complaining to Blizzard about the lack of changes to Windwalker, guys. Thank you.